I don't think it's, oh, it is on. Good. Okay. As Tony mentioned, every 7th hour, we take 3 to 5 minutes out of the day, and we pray a prayer that's essential to Jesuit life. St. Ignatius asks that all Jesuits pray this prayer once or twice a day, and it really helps identify how God is working within us through our relationships and our encounters with nature and art, and what God is asking of us. You may have never prayed it before, though I imagine some have. So this examen that we'll do right now will be like a teaching examen, and I'll walk us through the 5 steps. It's quite simple, and it just starts with us sitting in a chair. I tell the boys to put their butts in the back of the seat so that their back is relatively straight. Just take a deep breath if you need to. I invite you to close your eyes. And we'll start in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So before all prayer, St. Ignatius asks to remember that we are in God's presence, God is with us, and God loves us. So just for a few moments, we'll bring that to mind. And the first step of the examen, we're asked to be grateful. And so it's important for us to name 1 or 2 gifts or graces in our life. And these are things that we're good at, things that we enjoy, people that we enjoy being in a relationship with, our hobbies and such. So we can just pick 1 or 2 things and bring them to mind. And as we feel the gratitude, we should also know that these blessings in our life are signs of God's love for us. Now, the second step of the examen is maybe a little odd. We're called to ask for a very special grace to know our sins as strange or foreign things, right? So, your heart, ask for the grace to know your sins and to know them as foreign, or things that you want to rid yourself of. The third step of the examen is often thought of as like the heart or the core of the examen. We ask the Holy Spirit to help us recount our day. It could be maybe just a half day or a period of time that you'd like to revisit. So pick a time from last night or this morning or maybe earlier this afternoon. And with the Holy Spirit's help, with God's help, kind of revisit each episode or scene in your day as if you rewound a movie of your day and you're watching it back. And ideally it'd be silent, but I'll say a few words. As you do this, you want to be mindful of the thoughts you had, any thoughts that you recall, any words or conversations, and then any actions that come to mind. So we can start that process right now. Pick a time from the past and work our way up. And certain episodes come to mind that are especially meaningful. Maybe you're very thankful. Maybe they kind of cause some tension. Bring those to God, giving thanks or asking for help. Continue to name these graces like the first step. And as your sons go through this process day after day, this third step will start to uncover surprises. Right? They'll notice God in places where they might not have, had they not taken time to recall the day with the help of the Holy Spirit. And as the Holy Spirit walks you through your day up to the present time, I like to maybe hold on to one or two things from the day, maybe lessons learned or things to be happy about or grateful for, and savor those just a bit longer. As the third step comes to a close, we go to the fourth. The fourth step is asking for forgiveness. It could be for acts or thoughts that happened earlier in the day, or acts or thoughts from earlier in life. So anything that you really feel that you want to be rid of, just ask God for that forgiveness. And we especially know that God loves us and desires to forgive us. And the fifth step, the final step, ends in a way that St. Ignatius ended a lot of his processes, and that was with action. So after going over the day, after giving thanks for all our gifts, after asking for forgiveness, we look forward to the rest of the day and into tomorrow with a special dedication to make some changes, some amendments to our behavior, to our thoughts, in hopes of becoming more of the person that God is asking us to be. And again, these are mostly small and achievable changes to the way we act or behave. So, like, you might not want to say, like, God, I promise to never do X, Y, Z again as long as I live. But something smaller. So take a moment, kind of recall or name one or two things. And with God's grace and help, we commit ourselves to these amendments for the rest of the night and on into the next day. And St. Ignatius asks us to close the examen prayer with an Our Father, so let's go ahead and do that. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, deliver us from evil. St. Ignatius of Loyola, Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. As we say that prayer every day, there's a lot of words that I said, but ideally, as your sons learn this more and more, and they're still learning as juniors, those words will fall away. That process will come ingrained, and they sit down, they make themselves quiet, and then the examen kind of just happens. So I have two more things to promote, and then I'll pass the mic. Okay. Still loading. While we're waiting for the screen here, there's a handout on one of those chairs back there, and I passed out a couple before the larger crowd came. But Dr. Gall, the campus minister, is giving a talk next Tuesday, the 16th of October, at 6:30 on adolescent faith life, the development of an adolescent in their own faith journey. It's been a long time since I was an adolescent. My children are very young. you obviously have at least one child who's an adolescent, and you might know better than I how mysterious the adolescent mind and the adolescent heart can be. Dr. Gull is certainly an expert in this area, and definitely shed some light on assisting your son through the faith journey. Oh, good. Here we go. So the other thing, the final thing I want to talk about, just briefly, is our prayer website and our prayer app. Both are called Pray UDJ. The website is prayudj.org, and that's it right there. And if you look below the picture, there's 3 tabs, and that's kind of the core of the website. There's a scripture tab, a reflection tab, and a prayer tab. And you can see that's the reading of the day, at least the first reading of the day. And the other tab, thank you, Tony, has a reflection, and a lot of the times the reflection is based on the reading. And if you scroll down a little bit, this is pretty neat, that all the reflections are written by people within the Jesuit network. This is written by an author on Loyola Press. Many times, though, they're also written by teachers at Jesuit schools, and sometimes students from around North America. And then the prayer tab is a prayer in the tradition of the Jesuits. This one was written by the developers themselves. And every day it's new, as you might assume. Now the neat thing right now, during the month of October and November, is the prayer request function, and this is also on the app. And for October and November, we're collecting prayer requests for the deceased, for the month of All Saints in November. You can simply fill out the form, and in the request, the bottom section, you can request any prayer. But for the month, you could tell us who you'd like us to pray for, and we have a long-running list. And we'll assign each person a mass, right? And we don't have 30 masses in a month during our morning masses, so there'll be a group of like 10 folks. We'll have a mass said, and then also our prayer team, which is made up of about 15 faculty and staff, will continue to pray for that person, and then we also have a monthly or a weekly rosary that all of the intentions are mentioned and made a part of. It's a really great function of our school. And there's a whole bunch of other fun stuff in there. The app for iPad for a tablet and phone, both Android and Apple, has a function where you can set an alarm and it can remind you to pray the exam in. And I like to set mine for, 104? When our boys pray it. So every time it goes off, if it's on a Saturday or Sunday during the summertime, that alarm will pop off and I'll I should say an exam right now, right? So that's about all I have, unless you have any questions. Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. So for those of you who might not know me, my name is Anthony Trudell. I'm the principal here at U of D Jesuit, and I just want to start out by offering all of you congratulations. You've actually made it halfway through high school as parents. So junior year. So we're ending the sophomore slump, as it's affectionately known. And while every junior is unique, there are some certain common characteristics that come with the junior year. Kind of like our temperature outside the last day, where we're transitioning pretty hard from 80 degrees to 50 degrees, I liken the sophomore going to the junior year as a big, giant step forward into independence and adulthood. There's a lot of exploration that goes on in the sophomore year, a lot of angst sometimes. Sometimes you see that at home as they try and as your sons try to establish their own identities. And that furthers on, and what's becoming more important to them is becoming more apparent in terms of who they are and where they're at and where they see the world in their junior year. So the theme that we have for you tonight is balance. And why do we call it balance? Because it's true at U of D Jesuit, and it's true common in a lot of schools, that junior year is probably the most difficult year academically. So commonly in all the content areas, there's a pretty big transition, and there's a lot of balance. And then on top of that, this is a year where really we start the process of looking for college exploration. So balance is really, really, really an important theme, both for you as parents and for your sons, and to cultivate some good habits of balance at home. And so tonight, based with some of our nuts and bolts and calendar information that we're going to give you, we're also hopefully going to present you with some information and skills that you can take with you as a parent of juniors, that you can take home and practice with your family, or take a few nuggets away. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Chandler, who is our Dean of Students, and he's going to talk about some of our nuts and bolts tonight, and then we'll get to our main event. Thank you and welcome.
All right, folks, good evening. How are you? Good evening. All right, sorry, we need a little bit of energy tonight. I know it's for many of us, end of a long shift, but I think we have some very important things we want to cover tonight. And so one, for those that don't know me, I'm Kyle Chandler. I'm Assistant Principal for Student Affairs, 1999 grad. It's my 16th year. I'm in total here at U of D Jesuit, my 9th year as AP for Student Affairs. And so I do want to echo Mr. Trudell's sentiments. I want to congratulate you on getting halfway through the journey. I also want to express my condolences to you for now you have a junior who thinks he's grown. And so you may actually hear at home, he'll echo those words. I'm grown. Who are you talking to? When you see that, just understand that this is kind of a normal tendency of most teenage boys. I like to tell them in many cases, and I said this to the sophomore parents a little bit as well, my phrasing to our guys is, unless you pay for the toilet paper, you're not really grown. And then they all look at me and they go, well, that's true. So tonight we have a couple of different things that we're going to go over, but I got to tell you, I have a bit of a hidden agenda, so it's not going to be hidden when I share it with you. But since I told the other groups, I'm going to tell you as well. I want you to walk out of here fully enriched, understanding more about your adolescent boy and the illogical decisions he's going to continue to make from now until probably 45. But there's more to it than just that. For me, I've been doing these evenings as a method of self-preservation. By self-preservation, what I mean is, so people would acknowledge the guy that's in charge of discipline at a school like U of D Jesuit, it can be a taxing job, right? Teenage boys that always need to be kind of redirected, a lot of energy, a lot of independence or deemed independence. So sometimes I can even struggle with navigating in different worlds. And so we do our orientation in here every single year. So we normally do 2 different groups at a time. So we'll have freshmen and sophomores, and when they finish, the juniors and seniors will come in. And I got to tell you, it's a challenging navigation, because you go from telling freshmen how much you love and care and want to mold them, and this is the right place, to then having to shut seniors down and tell them that there will not be insurrection, they will not take this joint over, and they still have 180 days. So I got to tell you, sometimes in the midst of navigating those 2 worlds, you kind of slip up a little bit. And so at a moment that I thought I was excited about, I kind of got put in check later. And so what it was at orientation, one of our seniors came in, his hair was super floppy, way over his ears, touching his collar, and then he had the nerve to have on these pants that had exterior pockets, rolled up on the bottom with some athletic socks. And he walked in here, and it just sent me through the roof, right? And so I said, you know what, enough. Fellas, the dress code changes today. No more boat shoes. I thought to myself, yeah, Chandler, way to lay the law down. You did a good job. Those kids respect you, and you told them who's in charge. Then I went upstairs, and my phone rang. I answered the phone, and somebody said, hey, Chandler, I don't know what you did today, but they're ripping you. And I was like, they're ripping me? They said, they're ripping you on Facebook. And when they said they're ripping me on Facebook, number one, I knew it wasn't the kids, because the kids don't use Facebook. And so I realized it was the parents. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And so they was like, the parents are upset. You just changed the shoe rule like that, and they just bought their kids shoes. So that moment of extreme excitement brought me right back down to earth. And so what it communicated to me was the need to properly and adequately communicate with all of our constituents here at U of D Jesuit. It also taught me, it was a humbling moment to even share with our students, that you should never really make harsh decisions in a moment of stress or moments of extreme excitement. And so tonight is about us unpackaging that to make sure we adequately communicate what's going to happen with your son during his junior year. So just like anything, what we go over tonight won't be totally exhaustive. There will be some moments where you just have to trust and have faith that U of D Jesuit is making decisions in the best interest of your son. But just to take away a little bit of that mystique, because when your son gets in the car, he probably still says, you know, how was your day? What'd you do today? Same old, same old. So we're going to give you a little bit more, but at the same time, he'll slowly but surely begin to talk to you beyond asking you for money for the weekend dances or parties or things of that nature. But this will kind of give you a starting point. And so for everybody that walked in here, I'm hoping you're able to grab this yellow piece of paper. This is the calendar. I'm just going to project it on the top screen. I'm not going to go over every single thing just because as junior parents, many of you all have been through this journey already. And so the first thing is Health and Wellness Week. And so we're actually reaching the culmination of our first ever Health and Wellness Week. And so what we decided was our students, and well, you can even look at statistics worldwide about the growing impact of mental health and mental illness on teenagers, which is attributed to a lot of different factors. But this week we decided to present it through the lens of addiction. And so we talked about addiction from technological addiction to drug addiction, how those things impact mental health, and we've gone through it. And so we've had activities from yoga to labyrinth to coloring to, there was a post on social media that I actually thought was pretty cool. And so I wanted to just show it to you guys if I can get the right screen. Right? Like, so in this space, this is the commons. And so during the school day, our kids hang out in here. Typically what they'll do with their devices though is they'll just kind of key in on that one device and just focus on it. And so during this Health and Wellness Week, what it is was we decided to limit. It was a low-tech week. You know, if they really essentially had to use something, they were able to do it. But what we found was, and this was an unintended consequence, the noise level in the school rose significantly. But it rose in a very productive and meaningful way because your sons were engaging with each other in a way that was so valuable. And so this is one picture that they shared. These are guys, number one, like most of us grew up playing Uno. And we had kids there sitting there reading the instructions. And in many ways, I'm looking at it going, kid, you don't know. But kids playing chess and just talking and having a good time. And so what started off as a really punitive piece to the students, on Friday, they were all up in arms. Literally, they were talking about walking out of the school. And I said, you're going to walk out because you can't use your device? And then they slowly but surely were able to reel it in and understand that maybe there's some value in the person that sits next to me and me engaging in a conversation. And so tomorrow is the culmination of our week. It's really cool because we're offering yoga. Mr. Feeney, for those that know Mr. Feeney, Latin, Spanish teacher, he's going to offer yoga classes during lunch periods. We're also going to have therapy dogs here. And so the boys' eyes lit up, but the teachers' eyes got even bigger. They were super excited about therapy dogs being here on campus. And so we're excited to bring that to your young men. And we also appreciate those parents who've also joined us in this challenging week in many respects, to where you've maybe unplugged at home and you've been at the dining room table talking to your sons versus having your phone out. I mean, I'm guilty. You know, I'm at the table and I say, just one more email. Let me just send this one last text. I got to do, and our kids see that. So now they recognize, I know there's a rule, but there's always exceptions. And so for those of you all that were able to unplug, we thank you so much for that. So if we look at the calendar, so you know, the week of October the 22nd, the immersion trip witness talks occur. And so what's going to happen is the different students who've been on the immersion trips are going to go to homerooms and talk about their experiences and tell the students what it takes for them to apply for the immersion trips. So I'll put that on there because typically the juniors are the ones that will take advantage of these trips the most. They're not all international trips. Yes, we do go to El Salvador. The guys are going to Detroit. There's an immersion experience in Detroit, a Chicago experience as well. I know I'm missing out one other international trip, but that's just the gist of it. So they'll know. Applications are normally due a week after that. So I would encourage your sons to ask them, are they interested in doing these? And also push them to get beyond just the resume building opportunities. These are intended to be, you don't want somebody's life to be a resume builder for your son. It should instead be something that provides perspective and enlightenment for who he is and what he stands for. The 28th is UD Jesuit Open House. We expect all of our students to volunteer for either a morning shift or, either an early shift or a late shift, just to walk people through the building. As you know, and many of you all may have experienced it yourselves, we're not trying to censor these guys, right? They're ups and downs just like any school. And we ask that they walk through this place and tell parents about their particular experience here at U of D Jesuit. November the 5th and the 12th, our counseling department offers parenting adolescent workshops, 1 and 2. Those will go from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. and they're free. If you'd like to attend, just come on down to the campus on the 5th and the 12th. November the 6th, it used to be called the Focus Hope Christmas. Now we call it Adopt a Family Kickoff because there are other partnerships that we're using to get our families for this big drive. For those that don't know, every single Christmas, each homeroom, we have, I think, 41 homerooms. Every homeroom is assigned a different family, and they get a roster that says who's in that family, the ages, and the needs of the family. So that's why your son comes to you asking for money. That's probably why he also asks you to take him shopping to go and get dry goods or whatever it may be. Every student signs up to bring some kind of food items, and then they're also asked to bring in some monetary donations that are then put together. Then they go out shopping to go pick up goods. If you ever want a funny sight, I mean, imagine some teenage boys. Imagine you're junior going to a store and buying gifts, right? Some of these kids have no idea where the clothes on their back even come from. So when they're looking at sizes and they walk in here, it's really an eye-opening experience. So I'm encouraging you all to help them with that, but be a little bit hands-off and just watch and see if they can even navigate for themselves a little bit. It also is a good method of budgeting. Had a couple of kids that had a lot of money for their homeroom and came back with a very few items. They said, look, came $400 and they came back. I'm thinking, oh great, they'll get linens, some shirts, sweatpants, some underwear, some socks. They came back with the PS4. I was like, fellas, they were like, this is what I would want. It's all about perspective, and we love your boys. While the kickoff happens on November the 6th, December the 7th is the actual prayer service that'll happen where everybody gathers in the gym, and then we send everybody out. The moms and dads are very helpful in having a lunch when the guys return. They also drive out with the students to make sure they get to their destinations safely and expeditiously. A big one for you all, so we didn't invite the college counseling office to be here tonight because you all have a junior family college night on November the 7th at 7 p.m. So you're encouraged to bring your sons with you for those activities, and they'll talk to you about the second semester one-on-one meetings with your sons, and if you'd like to be there, you're also invited as well. But that's all going to be unpackaged on the evening of the 7th. Junior retreat is on November the 14th through the 16th, and so in total, I believe there are 3 junior retreats, maybe 4, we might have already done one, I'm not positive. So we had 4 junior retreats, but I wanted to put that on there because we're encouraging the guys to start planning ahead. What ends up happening a lot of times is they don't plan properly, and so all of a sudden they get to the last retreat and they're in their spring season. Or they have the spring musical, and now they're conflicted on whether or not they should go on the musical or whether they should go. Well, if they look at the dates ahead of time, maybe you can help them sign up for those earlier. Semester exams are the 18th through the 20th. So you know the exams are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Friday is that flex day. I mean, realistically, we all know how Michigan, how Detroit weather is, and so if we have a snow out, a rain out, or a cold out, trying to get adjusted to those, Friday is that flex day where we would push the exams to the Friday. So if you're trying to plan trips, I would say plan your trips to start on Saturday. So just in case something happens, we have that Friday to work with, because your son doesn't want to go on vacation and be that one kid who has to come back 2 weeks later and still take that chemistry exam. Another junior retreat, midwinter break, parent-teacher conferences, Easter break, and then Student Senate Convention. I put Student Senate Convention on there because that's a big deal for juniors. Our juniors are the ones that run for Student Senate office positions. So this is the leadership of the school. And so this is when the convention takes place. Your sons will be notified in January. They're going to have a meeting to tell the students, if you want to run, these are the additional dates that you can run. These are the preliminary, these are the primaries, so on and so forth. But it's a big deal. If anyone has ever been to the convention before, you know when we get in the gym and our students are in there doing their speeches and they're entering with their music and going crazy, it's a time-honored tradition at U of D Jesuit that we're excited to have your sons participate with. Then we have final exams on the 29th through the 31st. So those are the nuts and bolts as far as junior year is concerned. Any questions about what you just saw up here? Right, so I'd be, yep, Mr.
What time
Slider.
do you return on the last day of the junior retreats?
They return by 2:45. So they're normally here to take off and get on the bus, and you go on the bus, or go to practices, whatever it may be. Yep. So, but of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about one very important thing that happens during junior year. Anybody know? Really? The one that your son's been complaining about since he came in the door? The junior research paper, right? So everybody knows about the junior research paper. I mean, this is a beast, right? Everybody talks about it as though it's like Voldemort from Harry Potter. And so to assist in unpackaging this impossible, quote unquote, impossible task is one of our junior English teachers, Mr. Dan Babcock.
Hello, how are you? So I apologize, if your son has me as a teacher, this is going to be a little bit redundant because I cover a lot of this in mini class night, but I have a few visual aids that might be useful for you. The junior research paper, I want to tell you what it is, what it should look like when your son's doing it, what it should look like in the end, and then if you have any questions. I will not take up too much of your time. So it is a serious academic paper. Many students, the final draft they turn in could be submitted for an undergraduate. And 2 years ago, I had a student who submitted one that I think could have been submitted for a graduate program. It covers a novel that they will read. It's a British novel from the 1600s to the 1900s about. They'll spend about a month reading it, a month or so researching, and then a month or so writing, depending on their teacher and the specifics that they have for their program. The research should be done at home. The reading obviously would be done at home, but there is a lot of the work that is done in class. So let me show you what I give my students, and most of the stuff that I will show you, I've compiled from myself. I've compiled from Mrs. Armani, Mr. Hill, and Mr. Manuel. So it's, if your son does not have me as a teacher, they're going to see something similar to what you'll see tonight. Okay, so just to begin, the research paper begins in right away at the beginning of second semester. So, zoom in, or can you see that? I think you can see that. So, January 8th, right at the beginning, they'll get a list of novels that they can choose from. They'll get this document. So here's a list of novels. All the teachers will go over what each novel's about, talk about the highlights, what we like about it. They'll submit a document in which they, say I would like to work on these 3 books. They'll put their top 3 choices, and we try to match them with a book that we think would fit them best. So spend a month reading. There's various assignments. We do periodic note checks. And let me see here. Here we go. Reading complete March 5th. So they start reading end of January, January 29th. Should be done March 5th. So that's about a month to read. And we talk about budgeting time. I do a whole exercise where we read for 10 minutes, multiply that by 6, so how much of the book can you read in an hour, etc. Okay, so then we start doing research. We walk through, what does this mean? What should it look like? Where do we go? How do we do this? So they start working on research. Some of that is in class. A lot of it is at home. Final draft is due May 3rd. So they should be wrapping up research. This is from last year's calendar. So that was like around mid-April, and then 2 weeks to draft the paper. I know that Mr. Hill, if your son is in honors English, their papers due a little bit later. I think he has his due after the Senate convention. Myself and Mrs. Armani are around the same time. Mr. Manuel pushes everything up, I think, 2 weeks from where we are. But it's all around the same schedule. So what should it look like when they are doing it? The first month, they should be reading a lot, taking notes. Old school pen and paper is what we prefer. During the month of research, I want to show you one thing on the library page. Mrs. Checkle has posted, I gotta log in here. Links to various databases that the students can use to find articles. So there's JSTOR links here, Project Muse here. So they potentially can do everything at home without going to a library like we all did. But we always encourage students to go to the library to find the actual books that have many of these articles in them. So that month, They're working on research, looking up these articles. I have my students make note cards like I used to do because I found that very helpful. It helps them to organize. Then we start drafting, so we're writing outlines, thesis statements, organizing all these ideas into a paper. What does it look like in the final draft? Oops. Where am I here? PDF is this one. Nope. This one? Didn't work. I don't know, might be gone. Anyways, so it should look like a regular paper. Any of your standard English papers, no different. The only big difference in what it should look like is it's a little bit longer. Okay, so we're looking for about 8 to 12 pages of actual writing, and then there should be a significant works cited page in which they have at least 6 citations, 6 sources on that final page. Any questions? Yes? We do MLA, and Mrs. Armani is we call her the MLA Czarina. She will go into actually the science classes, because MLA is what the students mostly write with, and she'll talk about the differences between MLA and APA. Yeah. Purdue OWL is a great it's a website, and it's a great resource for your sons, and they'll learn all about this in that semester. All of your sons can do it. I've had students out on medical leave complete the project. I've had students suffer great trauma and still complete the project, both physical and mental trauma. Every student that has graduated here has completed this paper. They can do it. Trust me, they can do it. Trust all of us, they can do it. It might take dragging, but they will do it. Right, Ray? Right. Okay. Any other questions? All right, very good.
No, thank you. So recognize that, I mean, your son is probably upset that you just learned that, okay? Because one of the 2 things that were covered were, well, the main thing was process, time and process. This is a 3-month project. So when your son comes to you in April, probably more like in May, and says, I don't know, he just gave it to me yesterday. He said, I have to have all these sources, and I need to have, you can tell him, that's not how this works. And so I would say periodically checking in could be a very healthy and helpful thing. So I appreciate that, Mr. Babcock. I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Hassett in 1 second. I'll be honest, because I have you all here tonight, I did feel compelled to go over one thing really fast because it's becoming so prevalent and rampant, not just U of D Jesuit, but in all schools. This whole thing of vaping, e-cigarettes, juuling. I'm not sure how many of you guys know about these, right? So a decent number. So I just wanted to share and show, right? U of D, I love this place. I graduated from here, but we're not exempt from the pressures of the outside world, right? And so these devices, you know, this was 2 years ago, something that I confiscated. This is a little bit larger, bulky. When we first saw it, we still didn't really know what it was because it could be a lot of different things. And then we quickly understood that this is a SORN, and it's used for, you know, these are cartridges that they have liquids in. This is the mechanism that heats it up on the bottom, and this is probably one of the more legitimate ones. I've had other students that walk around with these things that are jerry-rigged, that are not regulated, that have batteries that explode, that are all types of dangerous, but they have no clue. These are other ones that we saw too on the market, and you look at these, and most of you all, if you saw your son carrying this, I mean, in most cases, you probably wouldn't even bat another eye because you wouldn't even know if you saw it. I mean, they can walk with these, and then they decided to get even more, make them even more concealable to where they make them like this. This is literally what my flash drive looks like. So if you saw this sitting on your son's bedroom, on his nightstand, you, again, wouldn't even think about it again. But what they're using is, again, there's a cartridge on the top that has a liquid inside of it. And when you ask the kids, so many of them will say, Mr. Chandler, it's just, they call it juice. It's just flavored water. And you can smell the fragrances. And then you tell them, kid, do you look at the viscosity of this? Like, this isn't just water. And how do you think you smoke it and you get 20 puffs out of this? Like, what's in there? Well, I don't know. I said, do you think there's formaldehyde in there? No, the guy that I bought it from told me that it was safe. I share that with you, and that sounds asinine, but that's what our boys are saying. because they're justifying, rationalizing poor decision-making to do something that they see so many other people doing. And so when I talk to other deans of students at other schools, or we even had a conversation with a representative from Wayne County, they're saying the problem is, I mean, before the research can even come out, the kids are all of a sudden moving on to something new and something different. And so now the kids are moving on from having nicotine-based oils in there to having THC-based oils inside. And so I know some parents, and none of you all would say this, but it's like, well, we all experimented a little bit in high school. This marijuana, THC, is not the same stuff that you may have experimented back in the day. This is high-level potency THC that is leaving kids in debilitating situations. So again, I share it with you not to scare you, but your boys hear this stuff, and they know, and my concern is it doesn't deter them. Many of them think that they're the exception. I can control myself, I got it, until they don't. Until they're laid out in the bedroom, until they're seizing up, until all these circumstances. And so I share it with you, again, not to scare you as parents, but to encourage you to pour in that much more and engage and have the conversation. If you get that funny feeling in your stomach, the reality is there's probably something behind it. If you walk in your house and you smell all types of fruity smells, that's not what boys smell like. So I'm telling you, something is wrong. And I've had candid conversations with some of our guys, and I'll look at them and I'll say, do you really think we're this stupid? Do you really think? And the first thing they'll do is they'll disengage with their eyes and they'll look down because you raised them to be upstanding men. And so when they're confronted with the reality, they immediately look down. I'm telling you, you want to confront your son, and when he disengages, that's when you step in that much more. Because we don't need these guys falling victim to somebody trying to make $1 million off your son's back. So I put this on the board. I'm going to make handouts, and I put them on the back table. This is just different hospitals have been offering different programs. This is just an educational piece that Henry Ford Hospital in West Bloomfield is offering, and they're just talking about the dangers of vape, going through panel discussions and having different law enforcement, social workers, psychologists, everybody imaginable helping these guys understand. I showed the kids a video about what they call popcorn lung that some people are suffering from because they're inhaling this stuff, and the kids' jaws literally drop. I'm going, what did you think when you bought this stuff? So one mechanism, so these are sold everywhere now. You can find them at 7-Eleven, but one way the kids have been buying them is through Amazon. So they can buy them on Amazon, and if they use your account, some of you all would never know. So if packages start showing up at home, I would start checking them. Of course, communicate with your spouse. Make sure they didn't order something. And if they didn't, I would start searching through the stuff. So again, not to scare you, but at the same time, I think this is one of those, I almost want to say epidemic levels. When I talk to deans at other schools, some schools have taken doors off of their bathroom stalls. Some schools have literally, they call kids in and just start patting a bunch of kids down. So I think I encourage you to engage with your sons and have the conversation, and we'll continue to do our due diligence here at U of D Jesuit. Right? So I'm going to pass the mic to Mr. Hassett, but before I do that, are there any questions, anything that I can possibly answer for you as it pertains to Student Affairs Office, anything that I went over tonight? Yes, Ms. Jones?
Vaping was one of the reasons that they can no longer have any dances. Is that ever going to be revisited, whether the boys can have dances?
Oh, so you asked a couple, that's a loaded question. So, number one, the cancellation of dances has been, they've blamed everything on the cancellation of well, we can't wear boots because of dances. We have to wear ties because of dances. No, right. No, the conversation about dances is, so I've been here for 16 years. Every single year I've been here, I've done almost every single dance that we've ever had. And I got to tell you, it was becoming increasingly difficult to have our young men treat the young ladies in a respectful way, even though we've had an increasing number of chaperones. So, we're not like some other schools where they just get them in and it's like, all right, we'll see you in 3 hours. We're crisscrossing the entire time. We're standing in the middle. My thing is, you want a mosh pit? Chandler will be right in the middle of the mosh pit. Right, you think you're going to do? And it was at the point to where it was going, what are we doing as a Catholic Jesuit school? What are we condoning? What are we tolerating? So we're taking a break for a little while. The homecoming dance was much more respectable. I can't tell you how many kids at the end of the dance go, so Chandler, can we have more? Can we have more? Can we do more? Let's give it a little bit of time. And let's see where we go. So even today they were asking about a formal dance in the second semester. How about we'll see? Let's go. Boots. No, they can wear boots in the winter, but just like they ask my kids at their grade school, when you walk in the door, you change your boots because they scuff up the floor, they embed the floors with salt, they make them dirty, and then everybody spends all their time cleaning that stuff up. My thing is, if you have to change your shoes to go into LA Fitness, then you should surely have to change your shoes before you walk into this school. They respect the carpet at LA Fitness more than our guys respect the floor in here. It was just too much time being spent cleaning up. So we tell the guys to get here with ample time, put their boots in the locker, and then put on their dress shoes, and then continue with their business. And most of the boys that were wearing boots weren't wearing functional winter boots. I'm not saying old school moon boots, but they weren't wearing boots they were wearing Timberland boots with the tongue flopped over, and they were walking around literally with their heels sloshing all over the place. And you finally get to the point to where if you're not going to respect the dress code, then we're going to make adjustments to where you don't have a choice other than to abide by it. And again, those are conversations that have happened for a long time. And then we get to the point to where it's, again, we're U of D Jesuit and we have heightened expectations of them. So, yeah, I appreciate the question. I appreciate you putting it out there. I'd much rather address these issues in person than having people speculate. I mean, I think one thing that we quickly learned is sometimes, and this isn't just for us, but even with our boys, some people don't want to get the truth. And instead, they prefer to speculate. And I think those are the most toxic environments in so many different respects. So my thing is we would actually we prefer to have the courtesy of just asking us directly and we'll give you the answer. No hidden agendas, folks.
So they actually can wear boots
To school, and then they change them, put them in their lockers, and wear school shoes during the day.
Okay, is there an opening date for that, or just whenever they need to wear them, they just can't wear them? Because the parents didn't get that message at all, like we were just told, like, so even.
Yeah, I mean, but that's another piece, I guess, for me, is, and I could do a better job with it. We made announcements for a whole week to the boys. And the truth is, not one boy came and asked a question. And so we were under the impression that all of these young men understood the expectations that were put in front of them. But sure, we could communicate a little bit more with the parents, but we're also trying to encourage a little bit more independence. And so can they wear boots to school? Sure, they can wear boots to school. They can put them in the locker, though. So there is no longer a boot season. So if they want to wear boots when it's 90 degrees outside, sure. Put them in your locker and then go to class. There's another question?
I was gonna say, I know the thing about what happens with campuses. They do have kids, and my son's one who's working with mercy resistant school, and they're having, at Interpersonal, which is like a Halloween house where they go, they're gonna have a night that they're getting together, so they are getting some interaction with females, with hopefully not having the problems that they've had at the campuses. And that's somewhere at the end of October, and I have the date at home, and I don't have it in my mind right now.
It's the Friday before. That's a great point. What I will say is this group of seniors, the officers, but also their co-chairs, and I'll hurry up. I'm sorry, Mr. Hogan, I'm taking much longer than I need to. These groups of officers and upperclassmen have accepted the challenge, and they've been willing to offer countless opportunities for engagement for our young men and for ladies from other schools, whether it be the backfield blast, whether it be the field trip to Erebus, whether it be a movie night the night before Halloween, whether it be, so my thing is there are other ways to engage in healthy environments with young ladies. So right now these guys are actually putting things together.
They're trying to do that, and it is a concern of mine, because I live in Ann Arbor, and at my church, they have somebody that works with the college students, who said a lot of boys between the age of 18 and 22 have a really hard time communicating, interacting with women. So I'm really encouraging my sons on the city to do things other than the dances, so that there is an
Yeah. No, I appreciate you pushing them in that way. Any other questions? All right. All right. Thank you, folks.
I'm going to be introducing Dr. Tim Hogan here in just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to keep my comments very short. My name is Jim Hassett, and I'm Director of School Counseling. And I have kind of the middle of the alphabet, okay? So I have some of your sons, undoubtedly. Once a month, we meet with your sons across 8 periods when one of the departments go off campus. Most recently, the social studies went off campus, so we took 7 through 12. We took from periods 1 to 8, anyone who had a period 1 social studies class, we met with them in here. And so we do programming. We do program and deliver information and have conversations with your son. That one had to do on self-care, self-advocacy of self-care, considering consequences of self-care, and mindful meditation as self-care. So that was one. On the back table, you're going to, you can pick up these. These were from other programs that we taught. One on suicide and depression, another on marijuana, okay, and this is the self-care one. One handout, though, I would like you to pick up, make sure you get it, has to do with keeping away from the dark side. So a little parenting tip, we need some tools. We're always asking our children to pick up tools, and as counselors, we're always trying to equip your students with new tools. Here's a really nice parenting tool. And it goes, it's a quick little piece of psychology. We get a picture in our head on how things should be. When we look at our reality and it's not happening, we try to balance our scales. What William Glasser, who designed this, said is that what brings people into a therapist's office is always a present moment relationship, and it always has to do with using the disconnecting habits. Criticizing, blaming, complaining, nagging, bribing to control, rewarding to control, resenting, punishing. Those are the big 8, okay? He said, keep away from those. It creates a disconnection. What do? Practice the 8 caring, loving habits: accepting, respecting, listening, supporting, trusting, negotiating differences, and forgiving. The best shot we have with our kids is on the strength of the relationship. And when we do these things, we burn through a little currency. So, 2 things about this. The actual words were from William Glasser, and if you want to know about choice theory, I'll give you all you need to know. However, the write-ups are from Leo Cachet, Father Leo Cachet, a Jesuit who used to be here after 40 years in Nepal, and he's a retreat director at Manresa. So these are beautiful, so you're on good psychological grounds and good theological grounds with that sheet. These make wonderful prayer and meditation pieces, okay? So I want to share that for you, so if it's something you can do, and it helps strengthen the relationship with your sons. And incidentally, we talk to your sons about the very same thing. If you're doing these things, it puts a dent in the relationship, puts a wedge, keep away from it, and it always makes you feel lousy too. So these are the kind of conversations we're having with your son, and if you'd like to know more, go to our school counseling website. Now, and there's also a meditation sheet. If this week was about anything, it was about having the guys get out of their heads, into their senses, back into their bodies through yoga, therapy dogs tomorrow. We had a sound bath in the chapel this week, sitting meditation. We built a labyrinth out in the Jesuit corridor, a prayer labyrinth. So there is a sheet on meditation there too. So meditation, simple things you can practice, and you can actually do these with your son, particularly the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 meditation. Okay. Dr. Hogan. Dr. Hogan was here last week, and he was a couple weeks ago, and it was remarkable. You're going to enjoy this thoroughly. He really answers the biblical question, can anything good come from downriver? And I mean Nazareth, no, downriver. Well, yes, because we're both from downriver, Wyandotte and Lincoln Park. And so he had a son graduate from here a couple years ago. He's at Notre Dame University right now. Tim is a specialist in imago marriage therapy and relationship therapy. He got that by going to Fuller psychological school, what is it? Fuller School of Psychology, and before that, he was at University of Notre Dame, and before that, he was at Aquinas High School, where he also did a little stint teaching. So he'll tell you the rest about his life, but he's been very generous with U of D, coming over the years, talking to the faculty and staff on teen life and how to strengthen relationships, and just giving us a window into what's going on. And so he's going to do that tonight. So thank you very much, Tim.
All right. So this is the all-star team right here, right? It is. I mean, honestly, there's one of two reasons why everyone in this room is in this room. And the first is because you care more than the average parent. And that's why you give up your evening. The other is that you may have lost a bet to your spouse, and so you're here representing the family. So either way, welcome. You've been sitting for a while, and when I taught at Aquinas High School, I taught freshmen and sophomores mostly. And so the rule of thumb here is there's nothing you can do for the next 30 minutes that's going to distract me. So if you need to, and really, if you want to stand up and go get coffee, water, please do that as you feel the need. That won't slow things down. In fact, I'll just keep talking if that's all right. I won't stop and ask what your name is and why you're getting up. And, so really, there's nothing that will distract me. The second thing, I would just like to, as a way of preparing for this, one of the things that I think is real important, and you'll understand why when we get to the end, because we're going through a cultural hurricane right now that is making life so different for parents that we don't even realize what's hitting us. When you leave tonight, you'll know what's hitting you, and you'll have 4 or 5 good tips about how you can engage your kids. Does anyone ever have the thought that it wasn't exactly like this when I was in high school? Yeah, right? Yeah, like it's why you drink, right? Because, exactly. So we are going to address that. But you want to do a little exercise with me? Because this will help kind of clear your brain and get your mind back. Remember, our brains are so overwhelmed right now with electronic stimulation all day that by this time of the night, we are just like, if we saw scans of our brains right now, it would be very scary. And to think that we're all going to be getting in cars and driving, that's even scarier. So let's do a little exercise. And here's the deal. If you feel like doing this exercise, do it with me. If you don't. We'd say, oh, it stings, doesn't it? You go, yeah. And we'd say, it's okay, little pumpkin, it's okay. And over time, she'd finally, right? And you'd put her down, and she'd be fine. And metaphorically and really, her blood and snot and everything would be all over my clothes. She'd be fine. So you get to the ice cream store, and the guy's looking at you like, really, dude? You couldn't clean up? Meanwhile, she's all cleaned up. But anyway, the question is, what happens with our kids every time we have one of those interactions? And what the people that I work with, they're called interpersonal neurobiologists. What they say is whenever we are with each other, we are constantly exchanging energy and information. And it's a very real exchange, energy and information. And so what was happening with Megan and I was that once something that you can study scientifically called attunement, once she experienced my attunement, like I was getting her, there would be this almost like the radio signal locks in, and suddenly we're in the same vibe. And now I can download my comfort, and she can receive it, and because she senses that I'm receiving her pain, I'm getting it. And as soon as I kind of get that right pitch of, oh, little pumpkin, she's like, he's with me, right? Here's the cool part. About 6 months later, it was wintertime, we're hanging out in the house, and we're in the family room, and we have a Colonial, yes, like that. Like in Detroit, there's 4 million of these. They're all built the same. And on the other side of our house, there was this doll that neighbors gave us. It was one of these dolls that's supposed to teach kids like good child care skills. So randomly, it just starts crying. He goes, hey, did you have one of these? And you're supposed to like run over, you pick it up, and you go like this, and it stops crying. Although I discovered you can just pick these things up and give them a good shake, and they also stop crying. I know. Yeah, my wife asked me to stop doing that. Apparently, that's bad modeling for parenting. I'm not sure. So anyway, so we're in the family room. In the other room, I go up to get it, and Megan says, I get it, Daddy. And we hear her little feet pitter-pattering into the other room, and we hear this little voice saying, it's okay, little pumpkin, Megan's here. So what had happened in that summer of exchanging energy and information, we downloaded into her. And so it is as if our children have miniature versions of us in them. They really do carry us around. We really do become each other. That's, I think, this thing. It's almost like we should have a theology of like a Trinitarian God or something, like God is relationship and we are relationship, and we become who we are in relationship. So these family relationships of repeated interactions are what make our young men who they are. So we don't want to give up on that. What I would like you to do, very briefly, is I want you to think for a moment about how different life is today for our sons versus what you experienced when you were growing up. And I have a model for this, and it's a picture I'd just like you to start thinking about. Think of all the relationships that you had when you were growing up. And this is, I'm going to show you a quick diagram of my family of origin growing up, okay? So this is a diagram. I grew up in a house, as Mr. Hassett was saying, in Lincoln Park, Michigan. It was about 1,000 square feet, and there were 9 of us in there. And in this house, there were, and I'm going to use this blue to show the relationships that I had growing up. I had, 6 older sisters and no brothers, and 1 bathroom. I know, right? Yeah, and which translates, if you put that together over time, it becomes about 3 to 5 years of therapy and about 2 different medications to stabilize my mood when I moved out. We also lived in a neighborhood which we called an Irish Catholic ghetto because it was like surrounded by houses filled with people just like that. That was right near Christ the Good Shepherd Parish. And you want to know why my parents bought that house? Because it was right near Christ the Good Shepherd Parish. And that's what people used to do, that you would buy a house near the church you wanted to go to. So we had these relationships with the church. The Irish Catholic ghetto, we used to say, you know, you could take a 9-iron out and hit someone who was drinking any time of day. I mean, that was kind of the sport. People drank all the time. People came to our house. You just show up on someone's thing, you'd say, "Hi, how are you, Mr. Ford?" And he'd give you a Stroh's beer. It was just the way it worked. I mean, they weren't like too liberal. I mean, we had to be 11 years old before they let us drink, but you know, for everyone else. And then we went to a church that always had 3 or 4 priests there. Then they'd get to know you, and they'd know you on a first name basis. And then we went to a Catholic school where the Sisters of St. Joseph taught us, and there were always nuns. Those are nuns, in case you're wondering. I don't know. I don't know what else they look like. God only knows what those look like. And then we also had this great relationship with the church and with, you know, Cardinal Dearden growing up. I mean, this was kind of our thing. Our coaches went to our church. So when you go to church, you'd see your coach. And when you go to the practice, your coach would talk about church. We were talking about school. So all these relationships were related. And all that to say, this was kind of my world. Now, you look at some of these other things in my world. When you look at divorce, we didn't know anyone who was divorced. I remember I was in college when we had, we'd go to literally Christmas parties. I mean, everyone, the one thing the Hogans knew how to do was procreate. So we'd go to these parties, and they were there. Every time we'd go, they would multiply by geometric shapes. So there was over 100 people. But none of them got divorced until I got to college, and then we started hearing about divorce. I didn't know that there were such things as homosexual couples. I didn't know there were lesbian and gay couples growing up. We knew there was this lovely woman who came to our house who talked about her best friend roommate, and we never put 2 and 2 together. Now we know they're partners and they're awesome friends, but at the time, we didn't have to wrestle with that question of gender and sexuality. I didn't know any Buddhists growing up. I didn't know any Muslims growing up. I didn't even get to look at porn. I shouldn't say that like I was robbed of that, but I mean, I had to wait till I got to college to find my first Playboy magazine. It's terrible. And you wonder why I needed therapy. Because I had sisters. And you know, to get pornography, you had to work for your pornography back then. You had to have a creepy uncle or something who would bring them over. And if you didn't have a creepy uncle, then you didn't get to look at that stuff. So the question is, so if you looked at, this is kind of what my family looked like. And if you say, that's like a picture of my family, those are my relationships. This describes why I'm Irish and Catholic, and why I drink, and why I do stuff for the Catholic Church, and why I coached when I was a kid, or when I was younger. It wasn't that long ago, just 20 years ago. So, now my question for you is, what do you notice when you compare your family now, what your son is growing up in, with the family you grew up in? What do you notice? And I would love for you to just turn to 1 or 2 people next to you and just make an observation or 2. What's different? Today's families are more what? All right? So let's just take a minute, and now would be a good time if you want to grab a little something to drink. We're going to take about 3 or 4 minutes to just interact with each other. I'll keep time. What's different today? Today's families are more what? How are our families different? And your mark it, set, go. I'm setting my timer. oh, let's see. If someone hasn't spoken in your group, make sure they get a chance to say one or two words, and then cut them right off. Okay. So let me ask, what words come to mind? What today's families are more what? Privilege. Isolated. When you say isolated, can you say more about that? What you mean by that?
Isolated, they're insulated from one another. Families don't interact.
Yes. Families don't interact as much. There's not that neighborhood interaction thing where you could run out and any neighbor could yell at your kid, or like if your person across the street spanked you and you came across and told your mom and dad, Mr. Ford spanked me. Yeah, what would they say?
What did you do?
I'm gonna hit you again. You're embarrassing the family, right? You get a detention at school, you can bring the detention home. What would your parents say? And you're grounded, right? What happens today when if a neighbor hit your kid? How would that go, right? I know.
Yes, indeed.
I know. It's a different thing. What other words describe today's families?
Smaller.
Smaller, busy. Any other words? Yeah, so here's the interesting thing about this. So this part of talking about families and family organization, I get a chance to do this interaction and workshops, and I get to go everywhere as far east as Bermuda and up in Montreal and west to Hawaii. And I only went to Hawaii to do this workshop because I follow a Savior who suffered on my behalf. And I said, if Jesus did that for me, then I can go to Hawaii and teach 6 workshops in 2 days because I'm not afraid of suffering for him. But everywhere I go, when I ask the question, how are today's families different? Those are the words that keep coming. They're busy, they're stressed, they're more isolated. This is a cultural shift. Something radical is happening in our world, and I think it's important that we get to understand that just a little bit better. So the question is, what's going on in our world, and what are the main changes? And I think people call what we're going through, probably the most descriptive thing is the information revolution, right? Now again, I don't know about you growing up. I didn't grow up that long ago. I mean, we're talking about the 70s, 80s-ish, and oh, look at that. It pixelated on the left. That's so funny. I'm talking about technology, and my technology failed. Wow. Yeah. Anyway, well, what's on the left, you can see the top of it, right? That's something that they were called telephones. And they used to hang on the wall, and they'd have this cord underneath them. Do you remember that? And when I grew up, remember with all those sisters, that thing used to hang there. And being back then, you had one phone, 9 people. The phone rings. I'm bored. I have no brothers. I'd run over and grab the phone and say, Hogan Residence, this is Timmy. Who would you like to speak with, and who's calling, right? Something like that. And of course, my sisters became annoyed with this quite quickly because then they would talk to their boyfriends, and I would just sit right there. I was very interested. I was a young psychologist. I was there for them. I wanted to listen and then comment on the general health of these relationships they're getting themselves into. And they were grateful in a very deep down way, but not on the surface. On the surface, they were actually quite angry with me. And so my dad had a compromise with them and got them a 30-foot cord. So one of those cords that just, and so I'd still get to the phone first because I didn't have anything to do if I haven't covered that already. And they would come and they'd say, this is Gregory calling for Mary Ellen. And I'd say, okay, just a minute, Gregory. And Mary Ellen, it's Gregory. So the whole house knows every time Gregory calls, which is important. And then she'd come and get the phone. She said, Timmy, get out of here. And she'd go literally down the stairs, around the corner, into the cellar, and close the door. And I would stay upstairs for about 10 seconds, and then I would tiptoe down the stairs, sit outside the cellar, and hear every word of Mary Ellen and Gregory's conversation in order to make my assessment about whether or not they had a good relationship or not. And so I was able to influence things to the point of, and this is not an exaggeration, for my poor sister Mary Ellen, who just celebrated her 60th birthday. She was dating a man named Gregory, and Gregory went into the Navy. But he wasn't faithful to her, and I knew that because I overheard their conversations. And so, it didn't bother her. She kept going back and kept going back. Finally, he was gone for a while, and then he got back in town on furlough, and he called, and I picked up the phone, and I recognized his voice, and I said, is this Stephen for Mary Ellen? I did that. And then it was actually Gregory, and so I got Mary Ellen, and they did break up.
And true story, I have not told her about my role in that breaking up. Can you believe that? Isn't that terrible of me? But she went on to marry an orthodontist. I mean, she did well. So it was a good intervention. It was very effective. And then with those TVs, if you remember, right, the TVs with 4 channels, and you'd get it. I mean, I know my dad won the 50-50 Ushers drawing, and we got that color TV, and it was like, and we'd watch whatever my dad wanted, but we didn't care because it was in color. And then we flip the channels, you get between the top, and then the bottom was UHF, so you go UHF, and then try and get a couple. And then the things would break off, so you need pliers to kind of turn them. Yeah, right. But the point is, think about how different that is than today's world, where everyone's got a screen in their pocket. And now, I was at a wedding. I mean, this was terrible. I was at my niece's wedding, Mary Ellen's daughter, who, by the way, played D1 volleyball. Both of her daughters played D1 volleyball and had scholarships. So she ought to be happy she married the 6'6" orthodontist and not the 5'11" farmer. So, but I don't think I'll say it just like that, and my apologies to farmers. So, we were there, and I'm out on the dance floor, and people and I'm like not watching the Notre Dame game because I'm being a family guy. And my son is in the marching band playing at Notre Dame Stadium, and I am being the good guy out on the dance floor. And people have their phones out there watching the Ohio State-Penn State game. It's like, this is wrong. The whole thing's wrong. So, but this is the right side. So this is the world we live in. And let's just talk a little bit about some implications. So we are evolving, right? The human race is getting stronger, faster, and all that. But here's the problem. Look at how fast computers have changed over time, right? We all have our story about, 50 years ago, that computer was that big, and today we have 260,000 times that in our pocket. So life has changed. The problem is this electromagnetic system that processes information for us, has it evolved as fast as that? No. And here's the deal. That's causing problems with our nervous system. That's causing big problems. Even kids, we think, kids know electronics. We don't, because we're immigrants and they're natives, so they understand. They're showing as many or more psychiatric problems as we are, because their brains aren't created to deal with all that electronic stimulation, and they need protection, and we're going to talk about how to get them protection. So how has this happened to us? I think we all know we just went through this huge economic revolution because of the information revolution, right? When I was growing up, we used to sit on the porch and drink Stroh's beer, as I mentioned, and the neighbor used to come over who worked the line at Ford, or at Ford's, which you call it. When you're from Detroit, it's Ford's. And that's right. He worked at Ford's. And he used to come over, and he would say to us, and my dad wouldn't disagree. He'd say, hey, Timmy, if that school thing isn't for you, just come talk to me. I got a guy in the line. We'll get you in. And this guy had a house. He had a cottage up north. He had a boat. And he took flying lessons, which was the coolest thing. He'd fly overhead and scream obscenities down into the neighborhood. We just thought that was the coolest thing ever. He could make it. Today, those jobs are gone. That was the number one thing that happened. So how has that affected us? The pressure, right? I was talking to a couple this week about their kid. 3rd grade. And he got 3 wrong on a spelling test. And it was a world war at their house. And I said, when did 3 wrong on a spelling test get to be a world war at your house? Well, he can learn. It's just all this pressure. It's like, why is there pressure? Well, part of the reason there's pressure is because if he doesn't, do whatever, get in the best, preschool, to get in the best elementary school, to get in the best high school, to get in the best college, to get in the best job, to get in the best cemetery. I mean, if he doesn't get on that track, then really bad things are going to happen. We just have this sense that really, I don't know what that B means, but I just know it's really bad. That's in our blood right now because of this. Because of this economic, we are all terrified that if our kid doesn't graduate from college, a really good college, I think we live with this unreflected upon terror that the world's going to come to a screeching halt. And most of the world is doing this, by the way. So now everyone feels this pressure. It also does all kinds of things about we need to go to school longer, and so kids are now in their mid-20s and they're living at home and still dependent on their parents. So it's no longer different. The other big thing that's happening is we have this relationship revolution because we are doing so much more interacting on phones. Radical changes in young people. University of Michigan is known internationally for studying empathy. They've been studying it for 30 or 40 years now. Every time they get a new class in, they study the empathy skills of college kids. And do we know the answer to this? And what is happening to empathy skills with college kids? It's going down and down and down. Why is that? Here's the short answer. In order for you and I to have an empathic connection, what's got to happen in my brain is I need to have my mirror neurons, when I see sadness, I need to say, oh, that's sadness. And then I need to have a sense of it. The word is sad, it's sad. And not only that, I have to have these things through, there's a part of the brain called the insula that connects the brain down into the body. It's a very slow moving part of the brain. And what that does is my body gets a chance to remind my brain what sadness feels like in my body. That takes time. When that happens, I then get a message back up to my brain, and suddenly I might start to cry with you because you're showing sadness on your face. Why am I crying? Well, it's about you. But the truth is, it's because I'm remembering what sadness is. But it feels really good for you, so you just take it and feel like you're with a sensitive person. But that's empathy. It's a whole body experience. It takes time. It takes a whole lot of visual data to hit my brain and go down through my insula. What happens when we are doing emotions mostly by phone? We don't activate the insula. We're not activating empath. So part of what that means is, have you ever had this thought? I've never, seeing this is being recorded, I've never had this thought about my son. But you may have had this thought about your son. Like, where are the social skills right now? Like, why aren't they picking up on these nonverbal skills? Why are they so intimidated and overwhelmed to be in social situations? It wasn't that way when I was in high school. Have you had that thought? You are right, it wasn't that way when you were in high school. Sure, we were awkward and we said silly things and it was really hard. But it was different because we had a lot more data. And my point right now to tell you is, we have skill in our bodies that our sons do not have. And their cultural context is not teaching them this, which is why it's really important that part of what we do with our kids, as much as possible, is we help them process their emotions and help them understand the emotions of people around them. And if your sons are like my son, being at a place like this is a perfect place to do that. There are chances for lots of conversations. But I would say this, never shy away from showing your son compassion so that they can have self-understanding and then help them understand what's going on for everyone else. Do we have time to laugh, or would you rather be home a minute and a half sooner? Okay, we're going to laugh. I saw one big laugh. This is what it looks like. Can you see that? Oh, you can't see that. It played a minute ago. Try it one more time. Oh. Maybe it's a sign from God. Okay, here's the deal. I'll play it for you after we're done, so people who need to leave, they can watch it. Have you seen the little video clip? It's not about the nail? Oh, then you have to stay after. It's that good. Okay. Okay, so... yeah, and so we know this, and you all said this. We're struggling socially and emotionally. But here's the thing. Our brains are overwhelmed. I love this quote from Tom Friedman. He actually wrote it like 12 years ago now. He said, just that long ago, Facebook didn't exist, Twitter was a sound, the cloud was in the sky, 4G was a parking place, LinkedIn was a prison, applications were what we sent to college, and Skype, for most people, was a typo. All that just changed. It wasn't that long. 15 years ago, none of you were on Facebook. It wasn't a thing. No one was, texting was not a big thing yet. All that changed. The very ways we communicate with each other have all radically changed in 15 short years. And we're like, why are we overwhelmed all the time? Why do we feel tense? Why don't we sleep well at night? It's because our nervous systems weren't meant to get pinged all the time with new information. And so our brains get caught in this dopamine thing, right? And then I just got a Fitbit. I don't have it on now, but you ever get a Fitbit and then you put notifications on it? And I'm sitting with clients and I'm like, zzz, zzz, zzz. I'm like, look, this is really sad, and I'll get to you in a minute, but oh, wow, okay. Looks like Notre Dame's quarterback is going to play. All right. So, and, I don't want to bum you out, but, the truth is, our kids are swimming in waters right now. Adolescents are really struggling, and depression, anxiety, it's rough. There's things like bullying that they have to navigate, cyberbullying, stuff goes online, of course, and then even the whole LGBTQ thing. Kids today are really having to look at that. Kids now have to figure out whether they're gay or straight or bi or trans. Those aren't questions we thought about, right? I don't know what your thoughts were, and anything we would say next would probably be politically incorrect, but that just wasn't the way we processed things growing up. Today, that takes energy to have to think that stuff through. I think it's a much more complicated thing. The other thing we're going through is a religious revolution, And by that I mean a lot of the things that used to be in the realm of religion have now been handed off to the secular world. All these cool things that religious groups used to do, whether it be, organizing and protesting unfair labor practices, which is an important thing today more than ever, feeding the poor, the civil rights, hospitals, universities, that all used to be very religious. That was led by religious people. But part of the revolution we're in right now is people who are not religious, who may not call themselves spiritual or godly, have gotten into all these businesses. So now you could go on a mission trip and feed the poor without doing it with a Christian or Muslim group. There's lots of secular groups who just do it because they're humanists, right? I think that's great news. In fact, one of the things I say for those of us who are really religious and spiritual is what we ought to do is have a big party and kind of say, we won. Like, look what we've done to Western civilization for 2,000 years. We have made the world, and there's good research on this. We're less violent than the world has ever been. I mean, percentage-wise, there's fewer people in slavery, more people. I mean, some people don't even eat animals, for goodness sakes. Like, when was that ever true in our past? We're getting more and more human and more spiritual. That's the good news. But then there's some challenges too. And yeah, we know, that's, if you want to know why I put that up there, I can tell you after. But here's, I think, the bottom line for us. We'd also like our kids to go to church and worship God and have a specific faith, wouldn't we? For many of us, for me, I'd like my son to trust Jesus and really have an ongoing listening relationship like we did today, where he can sense the prompts of God and the Holy Spirit in his life. The problem is, because kids have access to all this information and worldviews, they no longer believe that the local church and Christianity provide the only or even best avenue to spiritual growth and maturation, right? They're able to get their input from so many different sources. And so that's just, wouldn't you agree? Don't you do the same thing? Like, I do the same. You ever wake up and you're having a bad day? Here's a tip. You're having a bad day? Just go to YouTube. Motivation, give me some inspiration, and just a little Tony Robbins, like, you can do this, this is about your attitude, you just have to face this day, it's all in your mind, what are you focusing on, change your state, jump into cold water, you can do this, take a cold shower, right? Or like Joel Osteen, do you like Joel? I'm like embarrassed to say like Joel Osteen, people are like, you can't like Joel Osteen because you're way too smart for that. I'm like, sorry, but it's like, you're having a bad day. My daddy used to tell me you're going to have bad days, it's a test. You're just being tested. It's all right. You just got to pass through this test. Look at Joseph. Every illustration. Look at Joseph. Joseph was having you've been thrown in a well. He's having a really bad day. But look at how it worked out for Joel. He trusted in the Lord. You trust in the Lord, it's going to be okay. So what do we do? Here's the cool thing. What the world is studying, what people who study young people are saying is, number one, in fact, there's all these studies, and here's my recommendation. I'm going to tell you two things. Number one, incredible studies led by a man named Christian Smith. At least 5 best-selling books have come of it to understand today's adolescents. That's the first thing I want to tell you. Number two, don't buy any of those books and don't read any of them. They are the most depressing books you'll ever read. If you read these things, you're going to think the whole world is falling apart. The problem is, Christian Smith really likes the way the world used to be, and he's really sad that it's not staying that way, I think, because, but what he is saying is we need to understand the shifts in today's young people are seismic. They're a shift at the core of what it means to be human and how people are relating. And the same is happening in secular research, where they're saying today's young people are profoundly different, and there's 5 areas that we need to be focused on with our kids. And this is from a group called Castle, where they talk about the 5 core competencies of social and emotional learning. These are the areas that young people are showing massive deficits because of the switch to electronic communication and neighborhoods where people don't connect, and less time face-to-face in relationship. This is where we try and repair the damage. So these are the 5 areas, if you can see, and they're really easy to understand. The first is just understanding what's going on inside of me, and then knowing how to calm myself down. If I need to energize to get work done, how do I get motivated? This thing that I was doing, that's a really cool thing because it can energize you if you're feeling low. It can also calm you down. If you're feeling kind of angry or frustrated, then you can just kind of do this. Now, if it's because you're really angry at your boss and you're doing this on the way into sure, buddy, I'm ready for this talk. Absolutely. No, please, I'm not angry. What makes you think I'm angry? Son of a... No, I'm good. But it does. It helps you to calm yourself down. And we need tips and tricks that don't come in a can to make us more excited or more relaxed. And so we need to understand what's going on and manage it better. And by the way, that prayer that we did at the beginning, And we talked about this after we did this night last month. When you do the examine, you cover all 5 of these. It's a beautiful thing. In fact, this is a little diversion, sorry. I'm really heading to the finish line here. I know y'all want to get home. You're like, yeah, sure. You said we'll be finished about now. But the, I lost my train of thought. So, yeah, the exam. I know. I don't know why. Just that I study with have found out with young kids.